Hello, and welcome to Scott's Odyssey. Yeah, that was an out-of-context biblical quote that's supposed to give a much more ominous overtone to this particular video. Many people, when reviewing the weird and macabre aspects of history and fail to have a scientific explanation, just love to quote short lines out of the Bible, totally out of context and misappropriated in its application. And the subject of spontaneous human combustion is one of them. But we're going to dive deeper into the idea and story of Pennonites and some other people who went up in a puff of smoke. I will let you decide if this is a woo-woo video or not. See you in a minute. Welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, thank you for your patronage. And if you're new to Scott's Odyssey, welcome aboard. Now, I don't normally say things like this, but here we go. If you or someone you are watching this with are put off by sights of morbidity in any fashion, now will be your one and only warning to turn away. And you can listen to this in the form of a podcast I'll make later that doesn't have any pictures. You've been warned. While from a religious aspect, the concept of bursting into flames for evil people or demons when they walk into sacred grounds or territory is common. It's so common that, unlike Revelation, it even pre-exists biblical references. The stories that people have witnessed other people bursting into flames for all time is a documented fact. Now, whether they actually saw these people burst into flames or found them after they were burned is usually what comes to question, quickly followed by the mental state of those who witnessed the bursting into flames, or if they had a mental illness or drug interactions, so-called spiritual encounters, etc. The list is exhaustive. It would even be nice if we could go back to the first recorded incidents whose documents still exist and trust them. Like that one of Nicole Millet on February 20th of 1725 in Paris, where Jean Millet, her husband, was acquitted of her murder after his lawyer, Nicolas Lecat, convinced the courts that she had spontaneously combusted, leaving only a burnt corpse on an unburnt chair, and the case being ruled that Nicole died by a visitation of God. As a side note, Jean Millet died shortly thereafter, when it was found out that Jean was having a side affair with a younger woman who worked for him. His body was found in his straw bed. Well, actually, only his skull and burnt fingers were found in the bed along with ashes and no damage to the bed itself. And herein lies the rub with most of these older stories, where one declares it the visitation of God upon those whom are minions of the devil. You see, it's important to know facts. And well, even though there is a court case surrounding such a tale, Lecat was not a lawyer, but a medical student at the time of this event. And Lecat was at the scene of the crime a few days after the incident because you might say he was fascinated by the whole concept of such a macabre death and wanted to see it for himself. When the story was retold in France, Lecat was now a surgeon. And well, that carries a lot of weight in the presenting of your made-up news story to the people. Not too dissimilar to the media today, who will take someone with a PhD in basket weaving who gets hired by an adjunct assistant to the assistant of an assistant medical director and call that basket weaver a doctor of medicine. So as not to bore you with the similar stories that to today's modern and even untrained eye are obviously not real, let's jump ahead to the 1900s, where science in the medical field and science in the practical applications field was leaps and bounds more advanced than that of the previous 300 years, or even that of Charles Dickens, who used spontaneous human combustion to kill off Crook in the novel Bleak House. Let's look at some people of Pennsylvania who suffered a very strange end. On November 8th of 1964, a call at 8:42 a.m. came into the local fire department in Upper Darby Township, Pennsylvania. The call was regarding what appeared to be a house fire at the residence of Helen Conway, and the call was placed by her granddaughter just 3 minutes after she had checked in on her elderly and infirm grandmother. At 8:48 a.m., only 6 minutes after the call was placed, firemen and paramedics arrived at the home, and there was no apparent signs of a fire. The firemen and paramedics proceeded to enter the home and make sure Helen was okay. To their surprise, there was a light smell of sweet smoke within the house, but no signs of fire or fire damage. When they entered Helen's bedroom, the images that would unfold were a bit strange, let alone disturbing. Upon opening the bedroom door, a dense sweet smoke billowed from the room. As the room was searched, the assistant chief sank his hand into something greasy in the corner of the room. In this corner of the bedroom was found a scorched upholstered chair. The walls immediately above the chair were blackened. On the scorched chair was what appeared to be mostly ashes. At the foot of the chair were what remained of Helen Conway: unburned legs. And like the legs, the rest of the room was completely untouched by fire and showed no signs of heat damage. So in just 6 minutes, Helen was completely consumed and extinguished of her own accord. Although the initial comment of the fire chief was regarding his doubts of the wick effect because it would have taken at least 7 hours, he leaned more toward spontaneous human combustion. The final determination was that Helen had perished due to smoking, dozing off, and dropping a lit cigarette onto herself. This determination was made based on a number of cigarette burns throughout the home, on furniture, and on the floors. Although self-immolation by smoking was the purported reason for Helen's death, the science around the determination was unfounded and used logical fallacy of causation by correlation. This figuratively left a bad taste in a lot of investigators' mouths, but the case determination stands because it was agreed upon by the county coroner. When other forensic investigators reviewed the information along with medical researchers, the outcome that stands is very different due to known scientific factors, leading this case to be classified as a spontaneous human combustion. Now, when we say spontaneous human combustion, we're not talking about people just bursting into flames. Well, actually, we are talking about people who just burst into flames, but we're also talking about other incidents surrounding what causes people to burst into flames. These incidents range from the wick effect, which is believed that you have so much oily fat and are so dehydrated of water that your clothing or skin will catch fire and you'll slowly burn like a candle. Other incidents talk about sweet smelling or oily smelling gas in the air, or thin layers of oily substances left behind on the walls, or blue-colored smoke in the air. But in all of the incidents, a human burned so hot as to become ash, so quickly as to not spread nor damage other items with heat, and leaving little in remains, but those remains not suffering from burns, except for where they were formerly attached to the rest of the torso. Most of the time, spontaneous human combustion takes place in a room 2 or 3 away, or when these people are left alone and are mostly attributed to attempts of covering up a murder. Another train of thought common to most instances of spontaneous human combustion is that they are elderly, infirm, obese, heavy smokers, heavy drinkers, or they have mental illness. Which brings us to the next hot seat in Coudersport, Pennsylvania. After wishing his friends a good night and escorting them from his home at 9 p.m. on December 4th, 1966, Dr. John Irving Bentley went about his own business. Dr. Bentley was a 92-year-old physician with some infirmities and lived alone in his home. On the early morning of December 5th, Don Gosnell was on his rounds of gas meter reading. Because of Dr. Bentley's infirmity, Don was trusted and granted permission to let himself into the home and go about his job duty of taking down a reading from the meter. So Don let himself in and went down into the basement to read the meter. While Don was in the basement, he noticed a light blue smoke and a weird sweet smell. As described by Don, the smell was somewhat sweet, like starting up a new oil-burning central heating system. On the floor, Don noticed a pile of ash, a little more than a foot tall. There were no signs of anything that was burned around the ash, more like it had been swept there into a pile. Don proceeded back upstairs and looked to see what caused the ashes. What he found was a foot-wide hole in the floor. He then went upstairs to Dr. Bentley's bedroom. The room was smoky, and he searched over to the bathroom, and that was where he found the source of the ashes. Next to the toilet was Dr. Bentley's walker with its rubbers still attached, a hole in the floor, and the doctor's unburnt right leg with its slippers still on it. Don ran out of the house to get help. When he reached the gas company, he was screaming to his co-workers, "Dr. Bentley's burned up." Unlike the incident where Helen Conway allegedly burned due to wick effect, Dr. Bentley had a completely different correlation-causation effect placed on his story. According to an article written for the Pursuant newsletter in 1976, a rag touting itself as a journal of the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained, but essentially publishing non-scientific nor peer-reviewed articles, claimed to use science but actually use scientism from the darker side of the woo-woo world, not too dissimilar to those who claim flat Earth or crystals generating their own power. The author, Larry E. Arnold, states, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, Dr. Bentley was a known pipe smoker and probably kept wooden matches in his pocket. He probably caught himself on fire, went to the bathroom to extinguish himself, fell to the floor igniting the linoleum, creating a hole in the floor with a windy updraft which caused only the body to burn and self-extinguish the fire on the floor. I'm not saying he's wrong, because it does paint a very likely series of unfortunate events. But what I am saying is that correlation is not causation. And when your premise starts with probably, or maybe, or could be, or might have, then whatever the outcome of your theory, it will invariably be wrong because your premise was wrong. How did Dr. Bentley perish? Well, right now it's recorded as spontaneous human combustion. The most recent case of spontaneous human combustion was a retired Irishman by the name of John Nolan, who was walking the streets of London on Sunday, September 17th, 2017, and was witnessed by multiple people to just burst into flames. Unfortunately, John did not die immediately. He suffered third-degree burns over 65% of his body, which is counterintuitive to how this stuff is supposed to work, and then he died the following day due to his burn injuries. The similarities of sweet smells and blue gas are probably my favorite part of all these incidents. It would be neat if someone would apply actual science to this phenomenon, because if you understand science, you'd know that blue gas and a sweet smell is a sign of high ionization in the air, which comes from a lot of energy being used very quickly and bleeding into the environment. Is spontaneous human combustion, as defined as people bursting into flames, real? Well, understanding how much energy and oxidation is available in every living thing on this planet, we should believe it is. But also knowing that the transition metals such as iron and copper do very soft oxidization, as opposed to elements such as lithium that just wants to explode all the time. Yes, your phones and electric cars are just waiting for an opportunity to explode. But your body, it's highly unlikely that we could get hot enough to catch fire on our own. Does that mean we couldn't? Well, there's valid conjecture about that as well. For example, the type 1 diabetic has an issue with soft oxidization and can often find themselves in ketoacidosis, which is an abnormally high amount of ketones in the bloodstream. A simple form of ketones is acetone, which is unfortunately a highly flammable and highly reactive oxidizing agent. So mix a lot of fat with a lot of acetone with a lot of excess soluble sugars and you have a walking rocket engine. Am I reading that right? So maybe someone should see if these people were just type 1 diabetics. You know, great. Just when I was going to explain how this is all hullabaloo, I now have to walk around with another thing on my mind to worry about when I go down the street. As for the phrase spontaneous human combustion, it works in defining a good number of people burning up really well, without viable points of ignition or viable means of burning, as is found in many of these cases. Saying spontaneous human combustion is kind of like saying dark matter in physics. We have no idea what makes up dark matter. We don't know if it's a thing or a lot of things, but we do know whatever it is, that it's there. But because we don't know what it actually is, we call it matter that is dark to us, or dark matter. So, what is spontaneous human combustion in my opinion? Well, it could be a visit of God. It could be a really bad fart gone very wrong. It could be the Wick effect. It could be a series of unfortunate events creating a trifecta. It could be death coming for you and creating a cascade of failures like in the movie Final Destination. Maybe it's ball lightning. Maybe it's static electricity. Maybe your body made some chemicals on the inside that chain reacted exothermically. Perhaps someone touched you with some elemental critical mass. For all we know, it could be someone came into your house and shot you with a phaser or a laser or photon beam or a Klingon disruptor. All these have equal viability based on how poorly these incidents were and are forensically documented. But the one thing that is certain, spontaneous human combustion does happen and has been happening often. Nearly 500 recorded incidents in 300 years. And we still do not know exactly how or why it happened. If you enjoyed this video or learned anything new, be sure to subscribe, like, leave a comment below, because I always respond to your comments. Well, mostly respond to your comments, 90%, give or take. If you have suggestions for other stories that you would like to see, jump over to the About section of this channel and send me an email, or come join me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, send me a message. If you found this video interesting, why not check out this video over here, proffered by the almighty YouTube AI algorithm, or just go over to the channel and find a video that you think you'd enjoy. As always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.